Hey guys, Raleigh Jones with RouterBeast.com. In this video, we'll be taking a look at some Cisco ASA commands specifically for interface configuration. In this video, we'll be bringing up those interfaces, bringing up a couple of interfaces on a Cisco ASA in a GS3 or GNS3 instance that we'll be using to demonstrate this. We'll do a few basic commands on the interface that would be required to enable interface communication with other devices that are directly attached. And so we've got a um, topology here. So we've got the Cisco ASA V, the virtual appliance here, will be setting up an outside interface connected to router 1 and an inside interface connected to router 2. Router 1 and Router 2 are already configured with IP addresses, and we'll be adding IP addresses to the ASA um, for the purpose of communication there. In a subsequent video, we'll do some more traffic flows and things like that. But in this video, we'll just be configuring the basic communication, the basic configuration there. Okay, so in taking a look at this, there's router 1 configuration right there. Router 2 is configured with the 172.16.0.1, and router 1 is configured with the 198, or should I say 196, 192, 168.0.1 IP addressing there. And then over on the ASA, um, we'll be doing some configuration here. So looking at the interfaces here on the ASA, the inside interface is going to be um, gig 00, and the outside interface is going to be gig 01. Okay, so we'll be configuring those as such. Okay, and so a couple of things to keep in mind is there are tons and tons of commands and subcommands available to configure your ASA appliance. The further and further we get into knowledge of the appliance, the more you'll get familiar with and be comfortable using different commands. Initially, there are just a handful of commands, though, that you can use to configure basic functionality on the appliance, and particularly on the interfaces themselves. So that basic functionality basic is on the interfaces is really defined as being able to have direct communication with devices that are attached, and that's that ping testing that you would typically have in direct communication, layer 2 and layer 3 communication that can be established and can be confirmed usually with the ping test. But uh, Basic functionality for the device itself is allowing inside hosts to be able to access outside hosts, but not necessarily allowing outside hosts to access those inside hosts. And we'll see how that works out and how that plays out here. Additionally, we would want management to be allowed from at least one inside host, and so we'll be looking at some of that, and once again in some subsequent videos here. But to start out with, first command or first thing I want you want to take a look at here is, of course, you will get into configuration mode just like we would do on any other iOS device here with the config T or configure terminal command. And then we want to go into the interface configuration mode, and so here you'll notice that we've got different interface options here, and we're going to be using, as we mentioned, gig 00 for our inside interface. And so you'll notice that there are tons of commands that you could configure on the interface, but specifically what we want to do is we're going to be giving the interface a name. You have to assign a name to an interface in order for it to be able to have basic communication. Okay, so that name if, or the name interface command, gives the interface a name, and it immediately, well, it can immediately assign it a security level. So if you assign outside or inside, it immediately will attach an additional security level configuration. It's basically a macro that runs whenever I type in and whenever we configure the name interface command for inside or outside. Before we do that, what I want to do is show you the existing configuration on that interface. So show interface gig, show run interface gig 00. Notice that there is no name if, there's no security level, no IP address. Each of these will be adding. But what you'll notice here is once we configure the name interface, the name if, and we specify this to be, once again, you'll, you'll give it a name here, okay, name by which the interface will be referred, okay, and all other commands. And so here we're going to specify inside. Now inside is a default. It's a built-in built-in name that once I configure this, it's going to immediately set a security level. Now the security levels are numeric values that range from 0. And let me back up before before doing that so that you'll be able to see that. Okay, this is security level ranges from 0 to 100. Now, this is used by the appliance, by this ASA, to control traffic flow. Traffic is always permitted to flow from interfaces that have a higher security level to an interface that has a lower security level, but not the other way. Now, in order to enable that bidirectional communication, you can use access lists that can sort of poke holes in the way the security levels work. Okay, so access lists will permit traffic from lower security level interfaces to higher security level interfaces. Now, the default security level for an interface, or should I say for an outside interface, is going to be 0. The default for an inside interface is going to be 100. And so once again, that higher level 100 being the inside is always going to be permitted to send traffic over to the outside interface, but not the other way around. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to first of all set a name interface, set a name for this interface, and we're going to specify it as inside. When we do that, um, you'll see. Oops, sorry, I left some configuration in place. Let me pause for a second here. Okay, just so you know what we did here, what we ran into. I had done some previous configuration here where I was playing around with some redundant with this redundant interface. I'm going to actually remove that redundant interface, and I'll just go ahead and do it while while you guys can see it. Okay, got to remove the sub interfaces first. So I'm going to go into that redundant interface, and we'll once again I'll talk about this later. And we'll do a no and another no for this line right here. Okay, actually, sorry. Show run, and I'm going to do a show IP interface brief. Show interface IP brief. All right, so yeah, I had done some sub interfaces here, so we're going to get rid of those. No interface red 1.10, no interface red 1.20. So that's actually the complaint. I wasn't even reading the error messages there. All right, so now I should be able to do a no interface red 1. All right, so now show interface IP brief. All right, and so those are removed. All right, so that's a little bonus information there for you guys. All right. All right, so back to the interface gig 00. Name if inside notice it immediately sets the security level to 100 by default. So if we do a show run interface gig 00, you see that now the security level has automatically been set for you. Okay. Once again, that's a little macro that runs as soon as we give it this name right here. Okay. We're going to also assign this guy an IP address on this inside interface. And as I mentioned, router, this guy's attached to, let's go to the diagram here again. Okay, so the inside interface is router 2. So we'll go to router 2 and you'll see that we're already using that as an IP address. So we'll configure IP address, and we'll say this is .1 for the ASA, and .2 of course was for router 2. And so at this point we should have basic communication with router 2. Okay. All right, so the name interface show run interface gig 00, and we see that configuration in place now. Okay, so the security level set, the name and interface is set, and so now we will go and configure gig 01. And once again, before I do that, show run interface gig 01. I'll show you the configuration here. Oh, by the way, usually you would have to do a no shut. I didn't do a no shut on the other one because once again, I've been playing around previously on this router, on this ASA. Sorry. So we're in interface gig 01 here. We're going to say, we're going to give it a name, interface outside. Now, when we do this, the security level will automatically be set to 0. Okay, the security level, once again, running a macro, and so it automatically sets that security level to 0. If we were to look at the show run now, we see that security level having already been set to 0. And as I mentioned earlier, the default the default behavior is that traffic from a lower security level cannot go to one that has a higher security level, but traffic from higher security level interfaces can go to those lower security level interfaces. We'll go ahead and configure this. We'll go ahead and configure this guy to have an IP address. And as I mentioned before, this is looking at the diagram again. This outside interface is attached to router 1. So we'll look at the router 1 configuration. We've already got 192.168 interface IP address there. So we'll configure this as we'll configure the ASA as .2. And so now, taking a look at the running configuration there, notice it's still shut down, so we will not be able to ping until we do a no shut. Okay. And now, show interface IP brief, and we see those interfaces up and up. We should be able to ping now. Oops, sorry. Ping that .1 interface on router 1, and we are successfully able to ping at this point. Okay, so as I mentioned in another video, we'll be adding some other elements here, but we did the show interface IP brief command. You can also do a show interface command to look specifically at the interfaces here. And so if we look at this guy right here, this is now, notice when I do a show interface here, gig 00 is labeled as inside. And so when I do the gig 01, notice this guy says He sees it as being the outside interface, named as outside. Okay. These up and up um, indications here are layer 1 and layer 2. Okay. Layer 1 meaning the basic physical connectivity. Layer 2 meaning that the protocol, the line protocol, the encapsulation, of course, in this case being Ethernet encapsulation, that we're getting keep alives from the other side at layer 2. Okay. With that show interface command, you can also see, whether you've got packet drops and errors and collisions and things like that. Typical interface stuff there. Another show command that we could look at here is show name interface, and we see a summary of those interfaces with their names, which interfaces they are, and of course the security levels that are set there. Okay, so this has been just a brief look at a few ASA commands for the interface configuration. In another video, we'll go a little bit further and show you how to set up redundant interfaces and set up NAT, as well as we'll do some object groups and also static routes and things like that. So stay tuned for another video coming up, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.